Hi there, this is Brent. Thanks for being here. This is my first video of what will be 12 videos on this new YouTube channel. This is a New Year's resolution I made to myself because I've been wanting to start a channel for a long time. And I've been delaying it because quite honestly, it's a really weird feeling to just like stand here and make videos and post them online. But eventually my desire to make these videos has overridden my fear of making them, and we're kind of here at this point now. I'm really stoked to be doing this, and I'm really glad you're here. I wanted this first video to be about one of my favorite subjects, which is talking about what's going on with the world, speaking politically, but also spiritually, what's going on with all of the with our global population today, and my interpretation of it. And specifically, my interpretation is that we are going through a global awakening, what is sometimes called as a global awakening. And it's kind of a tricky subject to talk about awakening. So what do I mean by that? It varies from person to person. Many people have different interpretations of what it means to be awake, or what awakening is. But I want to offer you what my interpretation of it is. Awakening in this context, it means coming into a understanding, a realization of one's connectedness with all of life. And it's really easy to say, especially in spirituality circles, it's easy to say we're all one, all is one, and similar things like that. But these are all really nice things to say until you really realize that the basic element of what I am is also the very basic element of what you are. And that element is the ability to bear with me. I gotta calm my nerves, gotta slow this down. I can't go at this pace. The ability to be aware, the essential spark in me that knows that I'm here and I'm in this body and I'm talking to you right now, and you're aware of yourself and you're aware of the fact that you're listening to me right now. That wherewithal to be aware is your most basic element, and it's my most basic element, and it is the basic element of all things that exist as physical form, and that would include other forms as well. When you realize, as I'm sure you probably have had at least inklings of this if you are attracted to a message such as this, if you've experienced your connectedness with other beings or other forms, then it makes it hard to go about your life as if you were separate from everything else. So up until recently, up until maybe about 20 or so years ago, maybe 30 years ago, the primary way of going about life, the primary strategy behind life was I am me and you are you, and we're different people. And that applies also to different groups of people. Like if you live in a certain town or city or country or a religious group, you would be against the other. And whatever the other was, the other would have a sort of threat about it. Like it needed to be defended from or vanquished. And so you'd see that in the form of war, big battles, or you'd see it in the form of a lot of like sports events. Especially when sports events become really serious, it's about our city needs to beat that city. When you see debates of one series of thoughts versus another series of thoughts, and each set of thoughts is trying to prove or show that theirs is more valid or more correct than the other. When you see siblings quarreling, and in the case of individual people who are trying to just rise to the top of any sort of pyramid so that they may be above all the rest of the people. If you work in a certain industry, or if you're competing for a certain position or promotion, or if you have a website or a social media account and you wanted to have more followers or likes or whatever than other people. If everybody had 1,000 likes, then you'd kind of be all on par, and some people want to rise above everybody else. Not to villainize this sort of behavior or attitude, but it's just what I mean when I'm talking about approaching life as if the rest of the world and other people were not essentially what you are. And at a certain point you realize that everybody is essentially made of the same stuff that you are and that I am. And it's really, the fact that I'm standing here and making this video and speaking, and the fact that you're there listening to this video, it's one event that's happening, and there's only one consciousness that's perceiving this moment, but it's perceiving it from two different angles. And that adds a sort of richness to the event. And it is, at least arguably, the reason why consciousness created and emerged in physical form, so that it could seem like we're separate, and consciousness could learn more about itself and discover itself by having different perspectives, just as is happening right now. So on the mental realm, and the mental realm is responsible for governing the realm of self and identity, and is usually responsible for the sense of separation that we have when we invest too much in the mental realm and live too much in the mental realm. What I'm saying really doesn't make all that much sense. It's actually really confusing. You may be listening right now and you're like, okay, yeah, I totally dig this, but I don't really know what he's trying to say. And it's interesting because as I speak to you, I'm actually relaying a very specific message. There's actually something, I'm not just babbling, I actually have something that I'm saying to you, but it's the mental realm, the realm of words and data and information and linear and left brainness can't carry it. And yet it is still making its mark, and you can feel that. You can feel that especially if you're watching this and you're like, you have that kind of relief, and everything kind of just dials down a notch. If things feel like they're sort of unclenching or unwinding a little bit, that's how you know the message is making its mark. It's really interesting. How could a message be conveyed on a plane other than the mental realm? Weird, eh? And yeah, here we are. Also, interestingly, if you are up on the workings of the chakras, the energy centers on the human body, I won't go into too much right now. They're really, really interesting, and I'll maybe make another video about them later. But essentially, the chakras are 7 energy points on the body, one on the crown of the head, the third eye, the throat, the heart center, the solar plexus, the sacrum. You can't see it, but it's just below the belly button, and the root chakra on the perineum at the very lowest point where the torso points down towards the ground. They're invisible to the physical senses, but they are energy centers that interact with the universal energy, everything else that we consider to be outside of ourselves. And a lot of us function. Well, my tippy does here. A lot of us function from the solar plexus, which is the area that governs thought and information. It's the area that governs the sense of self and the sense of separateness. That we usually grow into when we become teenagers. You know, when teenagers start to adopt that rebellious phase where they say to their family, yo, I'm not like you. I have my own thing going on. And usually there's like this really intense, like, no! And a really like intense sort of splintering and divisioning because the teenager wants to explore their own way, and they want to create their own vibe, which they will eventually bring back to the family later. So, but most of us function from that area still, where it's like, how can I be separate? How can I be better? And maybe if you are governed by your solar plexus, your third chakra, you might be watching this and wondering, how can I get this information so that I can use it to further position myself away or above, or in some cases below other people, just as long as I'm distinct. And awakening is to rise up from here into heart-centered consciousness, where you are willing to momentarily surrender your identity so that you can merge with other beings, so that you can stop separating yourself from them, / stop fighting them, / stop feeling threatened by them, but just so that you can recognize yourself in them, and as you recognize yourself in other people, allow the conflict to dissolve. And so what's interesting is that as you awaken into heart-centered consciousness, there's this threat of what happens if, what if I lose my identity? What if I lose my separateness? What if I lose my sense of self? And so you kind of get that feeling if you've been against somebody or something for a very long time. And you're reluctant to totally hear them or look at them or understand them or appreciate them or respect them, because the fear is, well, what if I do that? Then I'll lose who I am, or I'll lose my boundaries. And the promise of rising into heart-centered consciousness is that all you lose is the conflict, but you never lose your sense of self. You're always able to be yourself and have your own particular thing, your own particular vibe, your own particular style. You're always able to have a particular signature that when people look at it, they're like, that's that person and not that person. But the war, the fight, the conflict, the insisting on separation is dropped. The really cool thing about this movement is that it's It's automatic, and it's independent of one's attempts to usher this awakening into fruition, or to make it happen. It actually can't be made to happen. It's usually an automatic phenomenon. And a lot of the time too, people will try to they'll hear about awakening and they'll try to meditate or work towards awakening so that they can use it to further expand their own personal agenda. And of course that won't work, which lends itself to frustration and friction and burnt up energy, and then eventually in a moment of surrender, like I don't know what I'm doing, I give up, I don't care anymore, just let's just let it be, then awakening comes in. Does awakening happen all at once? It can, but it seems to happen only rarely that it would happen all at once. Usually what happens is there's an initial moment, like that moment when you feel a really unmistakable sense of connectedness. It's usually a very profound feeling. You would describe it as profound, of connectedness with something outside of yourself. So a person or an animal, or even like nature, if you're looking at a tree. One of my friends who was an ice cube, you look at it and you see yourself in it. That's enough to get the ball rolling. When that happens, there's no going back. And from there, it's further expansion and expansion and expansion. But every time there's a movement into heart-centered consciousness, every time there's an awakening or a further awakening into one's connectedness with all of life, one also becomes aware of the suffering that one was causing up until that moment. It can be if you it suddenly occurs to you to be a nicer person and you realize that you've actually been really mean to some people along the way, or if you've realized that you've been acting pretentious or fake, or when you see sort of the facade that you've been putting on, and you realize how not you that facade was, and how ultimately how transparent it was to everybody else. Whenever there's an awakening, it's like the universe is, you get like this moment where you're like, oh yay, amazing, and then like in the next breath the universe is like, well, look at this is all that you've been missing up until this awakening. And then there's like a little bit of an agony, a little bit of a hurt, and sometimes there's an instinctive response to condemn oneself, to be mean to oneself, because it's in a lot of cases the only way we learned how to make something better was to flagellate ourselves and to hurt ourselves and be mean, because that way it's like the penance, and therefore with enough punishment we would be redeemed. It's kind of the old school way of looking at it. Well, if you did something wrong, you need to be punished, and especially if there's no parent around to punish us, then we act as the parent and we punish ourselves, and so we start being mean to ourselves. And it's ironic, because doing that actually delays further awakening, because it's possible to have the awakening and to feel the echo of pain that comes up, and to deliver your love to that, your newfound sense of love and compassion and respect. I love you. And you say, I love you to yourself, and all the baggage that comes up gets to bask in the glow of your newly expanded and enhanced and more powerful and warmer and brighter consciousness. And it gets to melt like ice in that new energy. And when you get into that habit of approaching your unresolved emotion with this sort of tenderness, then the process of awakening kind of really picks up a very nice momentum. And it's incredible the amount of wisdom that comes in. It's like it just flows in. You're like, oh, 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 just like one insight after another, one revelation after another. And you also get to really dive into the flow of life, and instead of just being like, oh, look at that synchronicity, look at that synchronicity, it just, the whole flow of life starts to have this sort of dream-like flow to it, where you can look at any event that comes to you, any moment, and you can see it as a direct reflection of your consciousness. And there's kind of a message and a lesson embedded in every moment, in every element, and everything that people say to you. So by global awakening, I mean everybody naturally, the climate of the universe has just come to this place where everybody is waking up. Everybody is waking up, including you. Some slower than others, right? Some quicker, or some people are going about it in different ways, right? The crazy thing is that, like, it's really easy to say, oh, moving from a sense of separation into a sense of unity, like as if it were just one isolated event. But the journey is as different as there are people. There are as many journeys as there are people. And every journey is unique and profound and tailored to so that the absolute maximum potency and effectiveness and value is gleaned from it for that particular person. And when you look at it that way, it makes it easier to kind of have a lot more respect for people going through their own individual journeys. So what we do now, like, we looked at 2016, and 2016 was just such a crazy year, right? One of the coolest things about Trump's election, it's one of the coolest things about Trump's election is that on one end it had this distressing effect on many of us, but it also had this effect of like, what is this real? Like, is this like actually happening? Like, a lot of us are a lot of us are just expecting to wake up out of this dream. It's all so surreal. And that's because there's this sort of separation that's occurring, where the old way of life, which is operating based on a sense of separateness and coming into unity consciousness, there's this chink and there's this movement where operating as if we were separate from each other, which is President-elect Trump's like main like MO, right? He's like, America first, make America great again. It's like, we gotta, win at the expense of others, or separate ourselves, or further have a more concrete sense of boundaries and identity, more walls, and more, getting rid of people who are not us and keeping people who are us, and only, protecting and helping people who are us. The sense of living as if we were separate is getting weirder and weirder and weirder, and all the politics and all the economy and all the corporations and all the churches and religions and all the structures and all the taxations and all the kind of dense ways of life. It's all just getting weirder and weirder and weirder, because it's having a harder and harder time holding together. And eventually it's going to collapse. It is on the brink of collapse. 2017 is going to be, it seems, even weirder than 2016. There's going to be more exaggerated versions of what's going on. And, excuse me, there we go. I'm almost out of battery. Got to wrap this up. And what's emerging underneath is or above or beneath, is people learning to love and respect each other, and to take care of each other, and to look out for each other, and to stop trying to win against other people. And there's this movement of sharing and doing things in such a way that it doesn't hurt the earth or hurt other people. So growing, buying locally, so that we don't buy things that were trucked across the country and all the pollution was released as a result of the trucking, and whatever else. I'm not really familiar with where all the pollution comes from, but I just know there's a ton of it. And that is it. All right. Thank you for listening. This is my first video. We made it through together. We did it. All right. The idea is 1 per week for 3 months. That's my New Year's resolution. So please help me stick with it. I'm pretty sure I can do it. And yeah, stay cool.